My family forgot to save me a room at my sister's wedding villa. We gave it to the groom's investor. I booked a hostel, smiled and vanished for 15 months. I could hear my mother's voice through the phone. Light and cheerful, as though she was reading from a script. The words felt like a slap, though she didn't realize it. The space between her words felt miles wide, the polite, rehearsed tone making it clear again that I was never more than a utility to be used, always dependable, always available. I tightened my grip on the phone, staring at the blurry spreadsheet on my computer screen. The words of my mother barely registered as my mind churned with disbelief. I had just wired $4,000 to cover the flights for the family's trip to Lake Como, Italy, for my younger sister Nicole's wedding. The money I had worked tirelessly to save, working long hours, skipping coffee shops, staying in on weekends. The money I thought was going to be a gift, to make sure everyone had what they needed for a once-in-a-lifetime event. And now, my room, the one I had reserved, was gone. A groom's business partner. Really, that's who was worthy of my space. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the fluorescent lights above adding to the pressure in my chest. It had been building for years, a slow, steady burn. A career spent solving problems, fixing everyone's issues, always cleaning up the messes left behind. But this was different. Where am I supposed to sleep? My voice was too calm. Almost too calm. Oh sweetheart, you're so resourceful, you'll figure it out. There's a perfectly nice youth hostel about 5 miles from the villa. I looked it up online. It's got excellent reviews, well, mostly excellent. 3.5 stars. A hostel. I sat still for a moment, letting the words sink in. The room was still, except for the faint clattering of keys as I resumed typing. It felt like the entire office, the entire world was suddenly holding its breath. Was I really hearing this? I was going to sleep in a youth hostel while my family stayed in luxury. My mother, so casually dismissive, continued with a smile I could almost hear through the phone. Well, I'll be there. You'll figure it out, like always. You're so good at that, aren't you? The words stung, cutting through the calm that had settled over me. They always said that. You'll figure it out. As if I were nothing more than a free assistant, an invisible force holding everything together. The past decade flashed before my eyes, handling their taxes, resetting their passwords, explaining the simplest things, making every birthday card, planning every holiday. They never asked. They never thanked me. They just assumed it would all get done. And I did it. Every time. Because I thought I had to. But not this time. This time, I didn't respond with a smile. I didn't offer to solve yet another problem. Instead, I felt a strange sense of finality, like something was finally breaking inside of me. Something I hadn't realized had been slowly dying for years. The words came out in a whisper, chillingly controlled. I just sent you $4,000 this morning, Mom. For the tickets. There was a pause. A long one. I could practically hear her fidgeting with the pearl necklace I had helped her pick out last Christmas. Well, about that, honey. She took a breath. Emily really needed good photos for her Instagram. You know how important her influencer career is. The lighting in economy is terrible, all those overhead bends and cramped seats, so I use your money to upgrade her to first class. It was only $4,000, but it made such a difference. She's going to tag the airline and everything. You know how she is. I felt the blood drain from my face. The world narrowing around the hum of the office. I was staring at the computer screen, but the words on it blurred. My throat tightened, the words not yet forming. Mom, my ticket. Oh, don't worry, sweetie. I found you an economy flight. It has 3 layovers: Newark, Reykjavik, Frankfurt, but don't worry. It's only 17 hours of travel time. You'll miss the ceremony, but you've seen Nicole in a wedding dress before, right? At all her bridal showers. And, hey, you're not fussy like Emily. You'll be fine. You always figure things out. You always figure things out. The words echoed in my head, repeating, spiraling. Those words were my life. I was the one who always solved it, fixed everything, for everyone. No one ever asked me what I needed. No one ever wondered if I was tired. No one cared if I was okay. I was just useful, just a tool, and I had had enough. The phone buzzed in my hand. I stared at the screen, a confirmation email. A flight upgrade for Emily. The $4,000 I had saved, the money I had earned working 16-hour days, was now a first-class seat for my 24-year-old sister, who had never worked a real job in her life. Something inside me froze. It didn't break. It didn't shatter. It froze like water turning to ice. I'm here, I said. My voice was eerily calm. Oh, good, so you'll look into those economy flights, right? And maybe bring some snacks for the layovers. Airport food is so expensive and you're always so good at. I have to go, Mom. There's something I need to take care of. Of course, dear. Don't work too hard. We'll see you in Italy. Oh, and could you bring that nice scarf Nicole wanted to borrow? The blue one. She forgot to ask you. I hung up. For a long moment, I sat still, staring at the rain-soaked window. The office was too small. Too hot. Too suffocating. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I wasn't going to Italy, and I wasn't going to be the one who figured it out anymore. Instead, I opened my desk drawer, pulled out a small, worn passbook, and let myself breathe for the first time in forever. I stood there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, the finality of the call settling in like a stone in my chest. Outside the office window, the rain continued to pour in sheets, the glass rattling with every gust of wind. It was mid-January, and everything felt cold. Everything, except for me. I should have felt angry. I should have been furious, or at least upset. But what I felt, more than anything else, was an unsettling numbness. A kind of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't the one who had failed this time. I hadn't been the one who had let my family down. They had failed me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, cutting through the silence of the office. I forced myself to sit back down at my desk, staring at the spreadsheet in front of me. The numbers didn't make sense anymore. Everything felt disconnected, like the world outside was happening to someone else, not me. For the past decade, I'd been the one who made everything work. Family vacations. I took care of it. Birthday parties. I handled the planning. Even the simplest tasks, fixing my father's taxes, scheduling my mom's doctor appointments, reminding Emily when to post on Instagram, it all landed on my shoulders. I had been the dependable one. The one they could count on to always figure it out. I thought back to all the little things. The things that seemed so insignificant at the time. Every time my father forgot his password, every time my sister needed me to handle her car insurance because she couldn't be bothered to learn how, every time my mom needed me to find a new plumber because she didn't want to take the time to research. It wasn't just the big things. It was the constant, never-ending requests for help, with no thanks, no acknowledgement, no appreciation. And now I was sitting here, in a cold office building, staring at the screen, realizing that no one had ever even considered what I needed. My mother's voice was still ringing in my ears, the casual dismissal of my feelings. You always figure things out, she had said. Always. Never once did they ask how I felt about it, or if I wanted to be the one holding everything together. They just assumed I would, like it was my job. I should have been upset. But I wasn't. The numbness wrapped itself around me like a protective shell, and I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. The truth hit me like a slap in the face. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a tool of free service. A utility to be used when needed and discarded when it wasn't. I had never been anything more. And the worst part was, I had allowed it. I had allowed myself to be trapped in this endless cycle of fixing their problems. Of putting their needs first, while I was left with nothing. I looked down at the passbook from Aunt Violet, hidden in the back of my desk drawer. I hadn't thought about it in years. Not since her funeral. She had handed it to me that day. In the quiet of the church, just before she collapsed. This is for when you can't stand them anymore, she had whispered. I had laughed it off at the time. Aunt Violet was eccentric, dramatic, always prepared for some kind of family fallout. But now it felt like a lifeline, a way out. I opened the drawer, pulled it out, and let my fingers trace the worn leather cover. $120,000. Enough to disappear. Enough to finally make a break. Enough to do something that wasn't for them. For the first time in my life, I was going to do something for myself. I stood up and paced the small office, the weight of the decision settling in my chest. This wasn't just about a room at a wedding villa. This was about everything. My entire life up until now. The years spent catering to their needs. The years spent putting my own life on hold for them. For what? So they could take me for granted. So I could be the invisible one. No more. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen. It was the same phone I had used to make all the calls, to book all the flights, to coordinate every little detail for them. I swiped through the contacts and found my mom's number. My finger hovered over the screen. I could call her again, could tell her I was upset, could explain how much I'd given up for them. I could tell her how angry I was. But I didn't. Instead, I typed a quick message, barely thinking it through. I'm done. That was it. I didn't need to explain. I didn't owe them an explanation. They hadn't ever asked me to explain. They hadn't ever really cared to understand. I deleted the message before sending it, and instead, I went to the search bar. Flights to Peru. One-way ticket. I could feel the tears threatening at the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. This was the only way to stop the endless cycle. This was how I was going to find my own life, without their constant expectations. I booked the ticket. The email confirming the flight arrived in my inbox, and I knew, without a doubt, that I wasn't going back. The phone call with my mom that morning had been the last straw. I was done. Done with their manipulation. Done with being the one who always figured it out. I couldn't go to Italy. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I couldn't keep giving while they took. This time I was going to figure it out for myself. I opened the desk drawer again, took the passbook and slid it into my pocket. It was time to leave. The decision had been made. I wasn't looking back. Not this time. I stood in my tiny apartment, the weight of the decision settling in like a heavy fog. My phone was still in my hand, the confirmation email for my flight to Peru, staring back at me. I had just purchased a one-way ticket, leaving behind everything I had worked for, my job, my family, my past. The thought should have terrified me, but it didn't. I felt free. The office felt like a distant memory now, the hum of fluorescent lights replaced by the deafening silence of my apartment. I could still hear my mother's voice echoing in my head, that casual dismissal, the way she expected me to always handle things. It was always the same. You always figure things out. I had figured it out this time, but not in the way she'd wanted. I looked around the apartment. It wasn't much, a small, second-floor unit with peeling paint and a squeaky floorboard in the hallway, but it had been mine. And now, it felt empty. I knew I had to let it go, but for some reason I wasn't sad. Not yet. Anyway. The sadness was buried under the relief, buried under the certainty that I was finally doing something for myself. The decision to leave had been made. But now, I had to face the hardest part: how to go. I paced around the room, my mind racing. I couldn't stay here. The memories of everything I had done for them, the years spent sacrificing my own happiness to cater to their needs, filled my mind. I had been the family's caretaker, the one who always stepped up, even when no one asked, but now I needed to step away. I grabbed the small safe from the corner of the room, sliding it open with ease. The key was buried under a pile of old papers, receipts, documents, things I hadn't needed for months. My fingers brushed over them, but I didn't stop. Instead, I reached for the familiar leather passbook hidden beneath the mess. Aunt Violet's money. I hadn't thought about it in years, not since the funeral. But now, as I held the passbook in my hand, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It was enough to start over. Enough to do something for me. I tucked the passbook into my jacket pocket and made my way to the front door. I didn't bother to grab much else, no clothes, no furniture. I'd sold most of it over the last year, purging anything that tied me to this place. I didn't need it anymore. The flight was booked. My ticket to freedom was already in my inbox. The only thing left was to leave the life I had spent years building and step into the unknown. The cold night air hit me as I stepped out of my apartment, the bitter chill of January sinking into my bones. I didn't feel it though. My heart wasn't racing in fear, it was steady, calm. I had made my decision, and I was following through. The streets of the city were quiet, the sidewalks slick with rain, but my mind was far from the damp pavement beneath my feet. I wasn't looking back. The family that had always taken me for granted would have to find a way to manage without me. They had never cared to see what I needed, never bothered to ask. But now, I was going to live for myself. I didn't bother to check my phone before I left the apartment building. I knew it was only a matter of time before my mother would call again. Before they would ask me why I was doing this. Why I was leaving them behind. But I wasn't answering. Not anymore. I hailed a cab and climbed in. The city lights flickering as we drove through the empty streets. The taxi driver didn't say much, and I didn't need him to. The only sound in the car was the hum of the engine, and for the first time in a long time, it was comforting. It felt like I was moving towards something better, even though I didn't know exactly what that something was. The airport loomed ahead, the bright lights of O'Hare Airport cutting through the night like a beacon. I felt my stomach tighten as we approached. This was it. This was the moment I stepped away from everything. The terminal was busy, the air thick with the hum of conversations and the clatter of rolling suitcases. I glanced around, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that threatened to rise in my chest. It wasn't fear, though it was just the reality of the situation. The weight of the decision I had made was heavy, but it wasn't the kind of weight that crushed you. It was the kind that told you, for the first time in your life, you were doing what was right for you. I handed the driver the fare, stepped out of the cab, and made my way toward the check-in desk. The airport was cold, but I didn't feel it. It was as though everything around me had faded into the background. The only thing that mattered now was the ticket I was holding in my hand, the one that would take me to Peru. To the unknown. The line was short, the terminal quiet for the time of night. I took my place in line and waited, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for my wallet. This was happening. This wasn't a dream. I was leaving, and I wasn't coming back. I handed my passport over to the agent, and she smiled as she checked me in. "Safe travels," she said, but her words felt distant. I barely heard them. I was already somewhere else, somewhere far away from everything that had held me back. I walked toward the gate, the low hum of the overhead speakers, and the shuffle of passengers around me filling the air. The moment I stepped onto the plane, I knew there was no going back. The door shut behind me with a soft click, and I made my way to my seat. I wasn't the person I had been when I left my apartment. I was someone new, someone who had finally chosen herself. The plane's engines roared to life as we taxied down the runway, the lights of Chicago shrinking below me. I felt the familiar weight of the world fall away as the plane rose into the night sky. There was no more holding on, no more fixing everyone else's mess. I was free. I closed my eyes, and let the sound of the plane's engines carry me into the unknown. I had no idea what awaited me, but for the first time, I didn't care. I was exactly where I needed to be. The first few weeks in Peru were a blur. The air felt different here, thinner, sharper, like it had purpose. Every breath seemed to pull something deeper inside of me, filling me with a strange kind of energy I hadn't known existed. The temperature fluctuated wildly, from the early morning frost that crept over the mountains to the scorching afternoons, when the sun reflected off the jagged peaks, but I didn't mind. It was all new. All unfamiliar. It was exactly what I needed. I had no plan beyond survival, really. I had never expected to be here, in a small village tucked away in the Andes, far from everything I'd known. But somehow, it felt like the only place where I could breathe again. The only place where I could finally stop pretending. I didn't speak the language well. My Spanish was basic at best, a mishmash of what I'd learned from textbooks and quick phrases picked up from the people around me. But the locals were patient, helping me stumble through conversations, offering advice on the best places to buy supplies, and teaching me how to barter in the markets. The mornings were spent walking through the village, getting to know the people. It was hard work, carrying bundles of wool from one place to another, learning how to judge the quality of leather just by touching it, trying to negotiate fair prices with artisans who didn't speak a word of English. But it was mine. It was real, unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life back home. At first, I kept a low profile. I wasn't sure how people would react to a gringo walking through their village, offering to buy their wares. But the more I learned, the more I saw the potential. The artisan community was small, but talented. And I, with all the business knowledge I had spent years building in Chicago, saw a chance to make something work. By the end of my second month, I had managed to secure my first deal, small, but significant. I purchased a small order of alpaca wool scarves from a local family-run workshop. It wasn't much, just a few dozen scarves, but it was a start. I sent them to a boutique in New York that specialized in handcrafted goods, and when they sold out within weeks, I knew I was onto something. That first sale had an electricity to it that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the thrill of the money, though that was certainly nice. It was the feeling that for the first time in my life, I had done something entirely on my own. I wasn't the fixer, the caretaker, the one who always had to clean up everyone else's mess. I was the one making something happen. For myself, I started to expand, making more deals with local suppliers, learning the ins and outs of the supply chain in ways I'd never been able to back home. No more corporate red tape. No more constant pressure to meet unreasonable deadlines. I was in charge of my own destiny now, and I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders with every successful deal. The small victories gave me the strength to keep going, even when things were hard. There were times when the language barrier felt insurmountable, when I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. But then I'd remember why I was here. I'd remember the life I had left behind, the one where I was always expected to sacrifice, to give until there was nothing left. And the life I was building now, one where I could finally take control, where I could do something just for me. By the end of my 4th month in Peru, I had built a small but growing business. I had established contracts with half a dozen workshops and suppliers, some of whom now trusted me with their finest materials. I was sending shipments to boutiques in New York, California, and even a few in Europe. Slowly, steadily, I was creating something real. Something that didn't belong to my family, didn't belong to anyone but me. I had become a part of the community here. The people had grown to trust me, and I began to feel like I belonged, not just as a stranger passing through, but as someone who had earned her place. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt alone, when the isolation of the mountains closed in on me. But in those moments, I would remind myself why I had come here in the first place. It was my choice. The noise of the market became more familiar, the chatter in the local cafes became less foreign, and soon I was able to understand the nuances of the conversations around me, picking up on jokes and references that once went over my head. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was an active participant in a life I had built for myself, from the ground up. I had escaped, yes. But more than that, I had found something I didn't know I was missing. Freedom. Not just the kind that comes from being away from the people who had held me back, but the kind that comes from knowing that I was finally in charge of my own life. The people around me began to take notice. In a way, I had become a legend in the small artisan community, an American woman who had come to a foreign land, built relationships with local families, and turned a handful of scarves into a thriving business. They didn't know my full story, of course. They didn't know what had pushed me to leave everything behind. But it didn't matter. The work spoke for itself. And the money started to flow. Not in a flood, but in a steady stream. I had a reputation now, a reputation for fair deals, reliable work, and honesty. My shipments were starting to fill entire containers, shipped from remote villages in the Andes, to boutiques in major cities around the world. I had created something from nothing, and it was beautiful. By the 6th month, I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. And I had a new purpose: to continue building, to keep growing, and to prove that I could succeed without the burden of my past. It was in those months that I first felt the shift in my mindset. I had come to Peru to escape, to heal from a life that had drained me dry. But now I wasn't just escaping anymore. I was creating. I wasn't running away. I was building a future that was mine, no one else's, and it felt damn good. The phone call came in the middle of my second cup of coffee that morning. The soft hum of the coffee shop was a strange contrast to the sudden, jarring buzz of my phone. I checked the screen. Unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, not wanting to disturb the calm of my new life, but curiosity pulled me in. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Hello? Is this Abigail Rhodes? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, authoritative. Yes, it is. Who's calling? This is Hunter Vance. I was your boss at Stellar Logistics in Chicago. I need to speak with you about some serious issues. I froze, the name hitting me like a splash of cold water. Hunter Vance. The man who had, for years, held me under his thumb. The man who took credit for my work and whose office had felt more like a cage than a workplace. 1,000 memories flooded my mind, long nights spent fixing logistics problems that weren't mine to fix, staying late, working weekends while he played golf or hit the bar. He had been the perfect picture of a manipulative, self-serving boss. What do you need, Hunter? I said, my voice colder than I intended. I've got a serious problem, he continued. It's come to my attention that you violated your non-compete agreement when you left the company. I've got evidence, Abigail. Evidence that you stole proprietary information before you quit. You're in breach of contract. I'm going to make sure you pay for this. His voice was calm, but underneath it, I could hear the undercurrent of menace. I took a deep breath, the anger bubbling up inside me, but I kept it in check. I had to stay focused. I had to play this carefully. Evidence? I asked, trying to keep my tone level. You think I took something from you? After I spent years doing your job for you. I've got emails, he said, almost too casually. You used the company's resources to download proprietary client data. You're going to pay for this, Abigail. Mark my words. I could feel my heart rate quicken, but I refused to let him see it. I had learned long ago how to control my emotions when dealing with people like him. He thought he could intimidate me the way he always had. But now I had something he didn't control. And I wasn't going to let him take that from me. I'm not sure what you think you have, Hunter, I said, my voice firm, but you're wasting your time. You've always been good at making other people's work your own. But you'll find that doesn't work when I'm not there to clean up your mess. His silence on the other end of the line told me I'd hit a nerve. I'm coming for you, Abigail. He finally spat, his voice dripping with venom. You're going to regret leaving. I hung up before he could say anything else. The tension in my chest began to loosen, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to intimidate me, trying to drag me back into the nightmare I had left behind. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I sat back in my chair, the soft buzz of the coffee shop fading into the background. I took another sip of my coffee, the bitterness now somehow satisfying. I had learned something in the months since I'd left Chicago. Something that had changed everything for me. I didn't have to play by their rules anymore. I didn't have to accept the narrative they had written for me. I was in control now. As I stared at the half-empty cup in front of me, the reality of what I had just done settled in. I had built something from nothing. I had gone from being the family's unpaid assistant, the one who always took care of everything, to a woman who could stand on her own 2 feet. I had created my own path, one that didn't require the approval or validation of anyone, least of all Hunter Vance. The phone call had been a warning. A threat. But it wasn't just that. It was a challenge. Hunter thought he could scare me, push me back into the corner where I had spent so many years. But what he didn't understand was that I had already walked away from that corner. I was no longer the woman who worked herself to the bone to prove her worth to people who didn't care. I was someone else now. Someone who had nothing left to prove. I pulled my laptop from my bag, opened it, and began. I had a reputation to protect, and I wasn't about to let Hunter destroy that. I would fight back. Not with anger or desperation, but with precision, with cold, calculated action. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I made a call to Carmen, the IT specialist I had met through my business dealings here in Peru. She was brilliant, and I trusted her implicitly. She'd helped me with some digital security issues before, and I knew she had the skills to do what I needed now. "Hey Carmen," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I need a favor. I need the complete cloud audit trail for my user account at Stellar Logistics. Every file access, every timestamp. Can you pull it for me?" There was a pause and then she responded, her tone immediately serious. "Of course. I can get that for you by Monday. But why do you need it?" "Let's just say, I think someone's trying to ruin my career," I replied, my voice quiet but resolute. "And I need to prove them wrong." "I'll get to work on it," she said. "You'll have it in time." I hung up, feeling a sense of relief. I wasn't gonna let Hunter get away with this. This time, I was gonna play the game differently. This time, I was the one with the power. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I doubled down on my work with the suppliers, getting everything in place for the next phase of my business. I wasn't going to let Hunter's threats derail me. Not when everything I had worked for was within reach. By the time the weekend rolled around, I had everything I needed. Carmen had come through, and I had the evidence I needed to take down Hunter and prove my innocence. He had no idea what was coming for him. And I was ready. The boardroom was silent as I entered, the air heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. The tall glass windows of the conference room stretched across the walls, offering a sweeping view of the Chicago skyline. The city's lights flickered like a sea of stars beneath us, but inside the room, it felt like a different world. The harsh, fluorescent light above was cold, unforgiving. It made the polished wood table seem even more sterile, more corporate. Hunter Vance was sitting at the far end, his arms crossed over his chest, leaning back in his chair with that smug, predatory grin plastered across his face. He didn't even look surprised to see me. In fact, he looked like he had been expecting this moment, as if he was about to watch me crumble. The others at the table were all unfamiliar faces, all high-ranking executives from Nexus Logistics. They were polite enough, their expressions neutral, but I could see the curiosity behind their eyes. They were here to witness a showdown. They didn't know who was going to win yet, but the tension in the air was thick. Beatrice Ford, the woman who had pulled me into this world, was at the head of the table. She didn't say anything right away. Instead, she motioned to the seats, inviting me to take one across from Hunter. I walked to the chair slowly, deliberately, making sure to keep my posture confident, my face impassive. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me, but I didn't let it faze me. I had worked too damn hard to get here. I wasn't gonna let Hunter or anyone else take that away from me. The moment I sat down, Beatrice spoke. "Mr. Vance has brought serious allegations against Miss Rhodes," she said, her voice calm but firm. "He claims she violated her non-compete agreement and stole proprietary information from his company before leaving. Mr. Vance, please present your evidence." Hunter's smirk grew as he leaned forward, clicking through his PowerPoint presentation with practiced ease. He was in his element now, playing the part of the professional, the man who had all the answers. His voice was smooth, confident, as he outlined his so-called evidence. "As you can see," he began, "Miss Rhodes systematically downloaded proprietary client data during her final days at Stellar Logistics. We had emails that show she was accessing confidential files, chat logs that indicate she was planning to take our clients with her after her resignation, and we have timestamps that prove she accessed sensitive information after she was supposed to have left the company." He clicked to the next slide, the fake evidence laid out in front of the room like a well-prepared crime scene. The room was quiet, the board members taking in the information. But I wasn't worried. I knew what he was trying to do. He was painting a picture of me as a thief, someone who had stolen from him and run away to build her own empire. But the truth was much more complicated than that. I didn't say anything. I just let him finish. Hunter clicked again, but the next slide didn't show any more evidence. Instead it showed a familiar face, mine. There I was, caught in a fake timestamp, sitting at my desk back in Chicago, supposedly downloading files. The whole thing was a setup, and I could see the smile on Hunter's face widen, as if he'd already won. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I leaned forward, taking a deep breath before I spoke. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice calm but steady. "That evidence you're showing isn't real. It's fabricated." Hunter's eyes flickered for a moment, a slight crack in his confidence. He looked up at me, not expecting me to speak so directly. Beatrice turned her attention toward me, waiting for me to explain. "How can you be sure, Abigail?" she asked, her voice measured. "I had a feeling you would pull something like this," I said. "So, before I left Stellar Logistics, I made sure to secure the data I would need to protect myself. I requested a full cloud audit of my user account from Microsoft Azure. All file access, every login, every timestamp. I pulled up my laptop and connected it to the conference room's projection system. The screen flickered to life, and a spreadsheet full of raw data appeared on the wall behind me. The board members leaned in, intrigued. This, I continued, is the cloud audit trail for my user account from the day I left Stellar Logistics. It shows every file I accessed, every login, every click. And as you can see, I clicked a few keys, highlighting the relevant data. This file, the one you claim I downloaded on January 10th. It wasn't even created until April 3rd, 3 months after I had already resigned. I watched as Hunter's face turned pale. His smirk faltered, his confidence beginning to crack. I didn't stop there. I know you've been using a backup system to try to manipulate the evidence, I said, looking him straight in the eye. The audit trail also shows that the file in question was created by someone using IT administrator privileges on your computer, not mine. It's clear you fabricated this evidence to cover up your own mistakes. Hunter's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. I turned to Carmen, who had been waiting outside the room, and gestured for her to enter. She stepped forward, her posture straight and confident. "I'm Carmen Reeves," she said, addressing the board members. "I conducted the cloud audit personally, and I can confirm that the data is accurate and untampered with. The logs are cryptographically signed and time-stamped. They can't be altered or deleted." Hunter's face turned a deep shade of red. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. I wasn't finished. "I don't just want to clear my name," I said, my voice growing colder. "I want to make sure you understand just how far you're willing to go to destroy people for your own gain. You've been mislabeling shipments, falsifying import records, and avoiding taxes." This, I clicked again, pulling up another set of documents, was a photograph of a container you declared as rubber shoe soles when it was actually filled with high-end leather footwear. "You've been avoiding tariffs, and I've got proof of it." Hunter's expression shifted from fury to panic. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I didn't get it," I replied. "U.S. Customs did. I filed an anonymous tip 3 days ago. They opened your container for inspection. And based on what they found, they've already obtained a warrant to audit your company's import records for the past 5 years. Just then, the door to the room burst open, and 2 men in dark suits stepped inside. Hunter Vance, one of them asked, flashing a badge. "We have a warrant for your company's records. We need you to come with us for questioning." The room erupted into chaos. Hunter leaped to his feet, shouting about lawyers and defamation. But it didn't matter anymore. The agents were already pulling him away, and I was free. As I stood there, the weight of the past months lifted off my shoulders. The fight had been long, but it was finally over. The evening I returned to Chicago felt like a different world. The plane touched down, and the familiar skyline of my old city stretched out beneath me. For the first time in over a year, I felt the pull of the place, but it wasn't the same pull I'd once known. It was different now, more like the magnetic force of a distant memory than a place I still called home. I stepped out of the airport into the cool night air, the crispness of it catching me off guard. I hadn't expected the Chicago winter to hit me like that, but it did. The wind cut through my jacket, sharp and uninviting, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of it. The cold seemed to reflect how disconnected I felt now, from this city, from everything that had once felt like it belonged to me. I hailed a cab, the familiar yellow lights flashing in the distance. I climbed in and gave the driver the address to my old apartment building. The streets were the same, but it was all different. The lights were brighter, the sounds louder, but nothing felt real. I wasn't the person who had walked these streets before. I wasn't the same person who had lived in that apartment. I spent the ride in silence, watching the city blur past, my thoughts drifting back to the family I had left behind. I had never expected to come back, never thought I would have a reason to. But here I was, returning not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I had changed, and now, everything felt like it was waiting for me to make my next move. The cab pulled up to the building, and I paid the driver, stepping out onto the cracked sidewalk. The lobby was just as I remembered, small, with scuffed floors and the lingering smell of old coffee and disinfectant. I rode the elevator up, the sound of the cables humming, and when the doors opened, I was back in the hallway that had been my home for so long. I stood in front of my old door, key in hand, and paused. I wasn't sure why I had come back. Maybe it was the unfinished business I had with my family, or maybe it was because I wanted to see how much of the past I could bury, by confronting it head on. Either way, I couldn't deny the fact that I was standing here, outside this apartment, knowing that it wasn't home anymore. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was just as I had left it, silent and empty, save for the furniture I had sold months ago. The walls seemed to close in around me as I walked through the space, my footsteps echoing in the hollow silence. The place felt so small now, so insignificant. It was hard to believe that just over a year ago, this had been my world. I stood in the center of the room for a moment, taking it all in, The small kitchen, the couch that had once felt like my sanctuary, the bedroom that had never quite felt like a place of rest. This place had been a prison for so long, a reminder of everything I had sacrificed for my family, for a life that hadn't given me anything in return. But now as I stood here, I realized I didn't need any of this. I didn't need the apartment. I didn't need the family that had drained me. I had walked away from it all, and in doing so, I had found something I hadn't even known I was looking for: peace. I walked over to the window, pulling the blinds aside to look out at the city. The lights twinkled below, casting long shadows across the streets. Everything felt so far away, yet so close at the same time. I had stepped away from this world, but it was still here, waiting for me. But I wasn't the same person anymore. The phone in my pocket buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw the name on the screen: Mom. I stared at it for a moment before silencing the call. I didn't want to talk to her. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face them, to explain, to let them pull me back into the life I had so carefully escaped. The truth was, I didn't owe them anything. I had given them everything for so long, and they had taken it all without a second thought. But now, for the first time, I wasn't just doing what they wanted. I wasn't just keeping the wheels turning for them while I withered away. I was living for myself, and it felt like a freedom I had never known. The apartment, this city, everything was still here, but it wasn't mine anymore. I had outgrown it, outgrown them. I was no longer the one who always figured things out, the one who was always there to fix the problems. I had built something for myself in a place far from here, and I had no intention of returning to the person I had been. I took a deep breath, looking out over the city once more. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Nicole. I opened it. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I never meant for it to be like this. Can we start over? I stared at the message for a long time. A part of me wanted to respond, wanted to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much they had all taken me for granted. But another part of me knew that responding would only pull me back into the same cycle. I tapped out a simple reply, maybe, but not. I closed the phone, tucked it back into my pocket, and turned away from the window. I wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to lose the person I had become. I was back in the same airport, walking through the sleek, glossy terminals of O'Hare once again. Only this time, everything felt different. The cold wind hit me as I stepped outside, the chill of a late autumn evening cutting through my jacket. I stood still for a moment, breathing in the air. It wasn't the same breath of anticipation or excitement I had felt so many times before. No, this was something else. This was the air of someone who had walked away from everything, rebuilt themselves, and was now re-entering the world they once knew, but as someone new. The city looked different from the streets below. The skyline still rose proudly against the sky, the lights of the buildings glittering like a reflection of the stars. But the city no longer had the same hold on me. For so long, it had felt like a cage, and now, it was simply a backdrop to a life I had left behind. I hadn't planned on coming back to Chicago. When I had left, when I had disappeared without a trace, I was ready to let go. I was ready to build something new for myself. But things had changed. I had changed. And despite the distance, despite the months of silence, I knew that it was time to face the past. I had no idea how long it would take to untangle the mess I had left behind. I had no idea what would happen when I walked into that restaurant, when I faced the people who had always seen me as nothing more than a tool. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking into that room as the same person who had walked away. I wasn't walking in as the daughter who had always sacrificed, who had always been the one to make things right. No, this time, I was walking in as the woman who had taken back control. The woman who had built her own life, piece by piece, without their help. The restaurant was small, but elegant, a place that had become familiar over the years. It was an upscale joint, one that always made my family feel at home. I had chosen it for a reason. It was public enough that there would be no drama, no scenes, and expensive enough to make them uncomfortable. I walked in first, taking a seat at the private table I had reserved. The waiter greeted me with a polite nod, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. I wasn't the same person who had dined here with my family on countless occasions. I wasn't the one who had played the part of the responsible one, the one who paid for meals, who made the reservations. Tonight, I wasn't going to carry that weight. I wasn't sure if I was ready to see them. It had been months, but it felt like a lifetime. I had changed so much in that time. But I knew I couldn't keep running forever. I had to face them. I had to face the family who had never once asked what I needed, who had always taken, and expected me to just keep giving. The door opened, and my parents walked in first. They didn't look as I remembered them. My father's hair had turned grayer, his face more worn. My mother, too, looked older, tired, like someone who had been carrying a burden for too long. Neither of them seemed to know what to expect from me. Nicole followed them in, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. She was visibly pregnant now, and I couldn't help but notice the way she avoided my gaze as she took her seat. Then Emily came in. She looked angry, but that wasn't unusual. What struck me more than her expression was the absence of the usual designer accessories that had always been part of her image. No more Louis Vuitton bag, no more perfect makeup. She looked out of place. For a moment no one spoke. The waiter placed the menus on the table, and they all stared at them, but I could see the tension. They didn't know how to start. They didn't know what to say to the daughter, the sister, who had just disappeared without a word. Finally, my mom spoke, her voice wavering slightly. "Abigail. I didn't expect you to come back." Her eyes searched my face for something. For forgiveness maybe. Or maybe for an explanation. I didn't give her one right away. I just looked at her. My mind flashing back to every moment they had used me. Every time they had taken without giving. Every time they had expected me to be the one who fixed everything. The weight of it all sat heavily on my shoulders, but I didn't feel burdened by it anymore. I felt nothing. "I'd been working downtown," I said, my voice steady. "I just didn't tell you." The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then Nicole spoke, her voice quiet but full of emotion. "We got your emails. I'm alive and healthy. Do you know what that did to Mom? To us?" I nodded, acknowledging her words. But I didn't feel the rush of guilt that used to come with them. They had wanted me to be their everything. They had wanted me to be the one who kept everything together. But I wasn't that person anymore. Emily slammed her hand on the table, her frustration bubbling over. "You don't get it, do you? You just left us here. You abandoned us." I looked at her, my gaze sharp. "Abandoned you? Or gave you a chance to handle your own problems for the first time in your life?" My voice was cold, detached. "I didn't abandon you, Emily. I stopped letting you use me." I reached into my bag, pulling out a yellowed envelope. I placed it on the table, sliding it toward them. Emily's eyes went wide, recognizing it immediately. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You wouldn't." "Open it," I said, my tone unwavering. My father's hands shook as he picked up the envelope. He pulled out the contents: police reports, court documents, lawyers' invoices. His face went slack as he read through them. "It was 4 years ago," I continued, my voice calm. "Emily got drunk and totaled a car. A hit and run. You didn't know because I took care of it. I paid $15,000 to keep her out of jail." Emily's face crumpled. The tears that had been welling up finally spilled over. But she didn't say a word. "I paid the price," I said, staring at her. "And this is how you repay me. By selling fake evidence to Hunter Vance for $10,000. The room was dead silent. No one spoke. The weight of everything we had been through hung heavy in the air. And it felt suffocating. Finally my father spoke, his voice cracking. "We didn't realize. We didn't see it." "You didn't want to see it," I replied. "Because seeing it would have meant feeling guilty. It would have meant changing. It was easier to let me handle everything. To let me be the one who fixed it all. But I'm done fixing it. I'm done being the one you rely on." The silence in the room was suffocating. No one knew what to say. The waiter came to clear the plates, his presence an unwelcome interruption. I turned away from him, taking the keys from my bag and placing them on the table. "The keys to the lake house. You're banned from it, Emily," I said, my voice low, "until you pay me back every penny you owe me. $1,600. I watched as her face crumbled. She looked at my parents for support, but they turned away. Nicole spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "You did this to yourself." The reality of it hit Emily hard. She broke down sobbing, but no one comforted her. "Not anymore." I stood gathering my things. "I don't want anything from you," I said, turning to my parents. "That's the point. I don't need you anymore. I stopped needing your approval, your validation, your love. I needed that when I was the family doormat. But that person died in Peru. I'm not her anymore." I pulled out $300 bills and placed them on the table. "Dinner's covered. Consider it a final gift." I walked out, leaving them behind. Outside, the cold air hit my face, and for the first time in years I felt lighter. I had finally taken control of my life, and it was mine now. No one else's. The city seemed smaller as I walked away, the lights of Chicago flickering behind me. This time I wasn't running away. I was simply living for myself.